Long before I found myself standing under that busted neon sign in the middle of nowhere, I used to think I knew what loneliness felt like. I thought it was staying late in my bedroom sketching with headphones on to drown out my dad's angry rants from the living room. I thought it was watching the clock tick past midnight waiting for a mother who never came back. But I was wrong. True loneliness isn't being alone. It's when you finally run, and the silence follows. It hums behind your ears like something waiting to catch up. That night in March, I didn't pack a bag. I didn't bring a charger or even a change of socks. I grabbed my wallet and keys and left behind a house that hadn't felt like home in years. My dad's last words echoed behind me. "You think that sketching's gonna pay rent?" As he hurled my notebook out the window like it was trash. That was the final crack in something that had been breaking for a long time. I drove for hours past places I didn't recognize. The world blurred by in dark shades of desert brown and black. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there anymore. The Civic sputtered when I finally saw a faint glow ahead, a crooked, flickering sign, Redwood Vista Motel. It looked like something out of a movie. Run down, low-roofed, half of it lost to the desert night. I parked and stepped out, the wind sharp enough to sting my cheeks. There were maybe 7 cars, none of them newer than 2005. I walked into the front office and rang the small metal bell sitting on the counter beside a plastic cactus and a cracked photo of what looked like a grand opening. A voice croaked from the back. "If you're alive, ring it again." I looked up. A woman emerged from the back office, old but sturdy, long white braid trailing over her shoulder like a silver rope. She had eyes that didn't blink much and a limp she didn't explain. Her name tag said Rosa. "You got a room?" I asked, rubbing my hands together. She stared at me for a second too long before answering. "Room 6. Don't go near room 9. It's gutted." "Okay," I said. "What's wrong with it?" "It don't like strangers." I assumed she meant the floor was rotted, or maybe it had rats. I didn't press her. I took the brass key she slid across the counter and headed outside. The room wasn't awful, but it wasn't good either. A weird vinegar smell hung in the air. The bed sagged. The old TV on the wall had no remote and cycled through static. I turned it off, sat down, and stared at nothing for a while. My thoughts kept slipping back to my sketchbook, probably soaked with dew or rolled over by a neighbor's tire by now. When I got up to use the bathroom, I noticed the sink was scratched. Deep gouges, like someone had clawed at it in desperation. There were stains around the drain, dark and dried. I told myself it was rust, or mold, anything but what it looked like. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Not when the wind sounded like whispering, not when I felt like the room was watching me. At 1:30 a.m. I heard 3 knocks, hard, spaced apart like punctuation. I froze, didn't answer. 3 more. I walked to the peephole, no one. And then, whispering. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't English either. Just soft syllables, almost like humming. I opened the door a crack. There stood Rosa. No braid, her hair wild around her shoulders, and the hem of her nightgown wet like she'd walked through swamp water. She leaned close. Her eyes were wide and not blinking. "Get out now," she whispered. "It knows you're not broken yet." She turned and walked. No. Floated toward room 9. The door slammed shut behind her. I stood there shaking, trying to make sense of anything. And then the hallway light buzzed out, leaving only the red exit sign glowing. I walked, slow and stupid, toward room 9. The door was open just enough. Inside, it was pitch black. I whispered, "Hello?" A shadow moved, not walked, shifted. "Mister!" I turned so fast I nearly fell. A flashlight blinded me. Cops, 2 of them. One looked young, one older and tired. "You Mason Harlow?" I nodded. "We got a 911 call from this location. Front desk phone. Said someone was in danger. that you might be. They escorted me back to the front desk. Rosa was gone. The bell, her name tag, gone. The place looked like no one had touched it in years. Nobody's worked here since 2013, one of them said, scanning the dusty room. Room 9's padlocked, hasn't been opened since a woman died in there. What was her name? I asked, my voice a whisper. Rosa May Blanchard. I left the next morning with my heart still pounding. I didn't go home right away. I parked off an exit somewhere near Bishop and just sat with the engine off for hours. When I finally walked back through the door of my dad's house, I didn't say a word. Neither did he. Not for days. It was like we were both pretending I hadn't left. He worked, I stayed in my room. The silence between us grew heavier, not quieter. I didn't pick up a pencil. I couldn't. Every time I tried, my hands would shake. My sketches would turn to lines and scribbles in that goddamn door. Room 9. That's all I could see when I closed my eyes. I tried to research the motel. There wasn't much, just old reviews and a mention in a missing persons thread. But I did find something. An obituary from 2009. Rosa May Blanchard, age 73, passed away from cardiac arrest. It said she was found collapsed outside room 9. Her husband had died years earlier. No children, no surviving relatives. The strangest part? The obituary said she'd been trying to help a guest. Someone who'd never checked out. Someone who'd never been found. I started sleeping with the lights on. I started hearing knocking in my dreams. Sometimes I thought I saw her. The version of Rosa I met at the door, in corners or reflections. But I knew better. At least I hoped I did. Eventually I sketched again. Slowly. A line here, a shadow there, and always, always room 9. I still have no idea what really happened that night. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was the stress, the lack of sleep, the weight of everything I'd been carrying. Or maybe some places really do hold on to pain. And maybe some people never stop trying to protect others even after they're gone. I haven't been back to Redwood Vista. I won't. But I keep a copy of Rosa's obituary in my desk drawer. Just to remind myself that someone saw me. Someone cared. Some places remember pain and some people never leave, even when they die trying to help. Listen when the world whispers. It might be warning you. Before I ever understood fear, not the kind from monsters or movies, but the kind that comes quietly, like a chill behind your ribs. I was 9 years old, riding in the back seat of my dad's Chevy Blazer on the last leg of our summer road trip. That year, 1998, had been filled with late starts and long drives. We'd made it from Sacramento through Yosemite, into Nevada, stopping at diners and gas stations that still used coin-op machines and sold cassette tapes by the checkout. Dad was in one of his moods that night. Quiet, jaw tense, eyes scanning the road. Mom tried to lighten it by playing a scratched Don Henley tape and pointing out the way the sunset was burning over the treetops. My sister Hannah was asleep with her head on my shoulder, her hair damp from a motel pool we'd left 2 towns back. We weren't supposed to stay at River Pines Motor Lodge. Our booking had been at a chain motel further down near the lake, but the AC was busted and it was nearly 7 p.m. when we rolled past a red neon vacancy sign flickering beneath tall pine trees. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since 1974. Wood panel siding, forest green doors, a gravel parking lot with a rusted soda machine humming in one corner. Mom said quietly, "Something about this place feels off." Dad was too tired to argue. He got the keys while we unloaded our stuff into room 112. The inside was no better. Green carpet that left fuzz on your socks. 2 full beds with comforters that smelled like old detergent and cigarette ash. A microwave with a busted door sat in the corner next to a TV that only got 2 channels clearly. Above the headboard, a crooked-framed photo of Lake Tahoe leaned to one side, casting a weird shadow that stretched to the ceiling when the lights were on. We had cup noodles for dinner and watched a grainy sitcom rerun while Dad made notes in his spiral planner. Hannah fell asleep with her face pressed into my arm, her stuffed elephant poking out from under the covers. I remember Mom sat by the door for a while, watching through the peephole before finally climbing into bed. I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because the air smelled weird, like bleach mixed with mildew, and the buzzing from the hallway vending machine was loud through the wall. Around 1:20 a.m., my throat was dry and the cup in the bathroom was sticky with some leftover toothpaste. I slipped out of bed and opened the door just enough to slip into the hallway, barefoot, wearing my Batman pajamas. The hall was quiet, dimly lit by old wall sconces. The vending machine at the far end buzzed like a broken street lamp. As I walked toward it, I remember thinking how strange it was that all the doors were closed, but none of them had the little safety latches on. Then I heard it. A laugh, soft, offbeat, male, but it didn't sound real. It sounded like someone pretending to be a kid. The laugh froze me in place. It came from somewhere near room 103, a low, hollow kind of sound that didn't fit the time of night or the setting. I couldn't explain why it made the hairs on my arms stand up, but something about it didn't sit right. I turned my head slowly. That's when I saw him. A man, crouched just beyond the vending machine. He was maybe in his 40s, with thick glasses that glinted in the dim hallway light, and a mustache curled at the ends like someone trying to look friendly. He was rocking gently on his heels, his hands hanging limp at his sides. But it wasn't his posture that got me. It was his face. He was grinning. A wide, strained grin like he'd been holding it too long and his face had started to crack from the effort. And he wasn't looking at me, not exactly. He was looking just past me, toward the direction of room 112, toward our room. I froze. His head tilted to the side, slowly, like a confused dog. Then he looked directly at me. The smile never changed. "You're up late," he said, barely above a whisper. "Want to play a hallway game?" I backed up one step, then another. I couldn't make my feet move fast. My legs felt like jelly. The vending machine's hum was the only other sound, buzzing louder and louder in my ears. I turned and ran. Didn't scream, didn't cry. Just ran full speed back to the room, slammed the door shut behind me, and threw the latch. I climbed into bed, heart hammering, eyes wide in the dark. My mom stirred. "Matt, everything okay?" "There was a man," I whispered, "in the hall. He was smiling." She blinked at me sleepily. "Honey, you had a dream?" Dad got up and peeked through the peephole, then opened the door, stepped into the hallway for a few seconds and came back. "Probably someone's drunk uncle," he muttered. "Nothing out there now." I didn't argue. I just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying not to breathe too loud. That vending machine buzz didn't stop all night. When the sun finally came up, I felt like I hadn't blinked once. The next morning, we were all quiet. Mom looked tired, and Dad seemed in a rush. Hannah wanted cereal, but the breakfast spread in the lobby was dry muffins and lukewarm orange juice. I wandered over to the office corkboard while my parents checked out. There were brochures for lake tours, horse rentals, and hiking trails, but behind them was an old photo, curled at the edges tucked under a pushpin. It showed a group of people standing in front of the motel office. Staff, maybe. The picture was dated July 1978. Everyone was smiling, except one. In the back row, crouched behind a woman holding a clipboard, was the same man I saw last night. Same thick glasses, same curled mustache, same grin. My stomach flipped. I pulled on Mom's sleeve and pointed. She looked and froze. "Let's go," she said sharply. "Now." In the car, after a long silence, she finally spoke. "I think I saw him too." I looked at her. "When?" I asked. She didn't look at me when she answered. "When I was your age. My parents stopped here one night, on the way back from Reno. I woke up and saw a man smiling in the hallway. Same glasses, same face. But that would have been 20 years ago." Neither of us said anything after that. Even Hannah stayed quiet, chewing her muffin in the back seat. Years passed. We never brought it up again. That trip became one of those strange things families gloss over, a story we never retold at holidays, but I never forgot it. In college, I got curious. One night, I looked up River Pines Motor Lodge online. The number was disconnected. No recent reviews, no recent anything. So I searched the town archives, scanned old microfilm from the library. Most of it was boring. Floods, fireworks events, traffic rerouting. But then I found it. A news clipping from August 1979. 7-year-old girl vanishes at River Pines Motor Lodge, last seen by her parents near room 103. Ongoing investigation. No suspects identified. There was a sketch. Not an exact match, but close. Glasses, curled mustache, neutral expression, and that same posture like he never stood straight. No follow-up article, no arrest, just gone. Even now, when I stay in hotels for work, I can't help it. I check the hallways. I never go out for water past midnight. I avoid vending machines. And I don't look too closely at old staff photos. Because if he's still out there, crouched, quiet, waiting, I don't want him to know I remember. I don't want him to smile at me again. Some instincts aren't just fears. They're warnings. Listen to them. Your body sometimes remembers what your mind tries to forget. I always told myself I wasn't the kind of person who let fear run the show. I'd flown to new cities alone, done late-night walks back to hostels in foreign countries, and spent too many hours writing horror scripts in cafes without ever checking who was behind me. But Oregon got under my skin. Not the forests or the people, but what happened that one night outside Eugene. In October 2019, I'd finally gotten accepted to a small writers' conference. Nothing fancy, just 3 days of panels, peer reviews, and a shot at pitching my script to a few indie producers. It felt like a door opening. And because traveling solo still made me uneasy, I asked Natalie to come. We'd been friends since freshman year of high school, and she'd always had that grounded, no-bull approach I admired. We booked a room at Willow Creek Inn Suites, a cheap motel just off Franklin Boulevard. It was rated 3 stars, looked decent enough online, and was 10 minutes from the conference center. We pulled into the lot around 6:15 that evening. Light rain peppered the windshield, and the neon sign above the office buzzed with flickering red letters. I spotted the truck before we even parked. A blue Ford, older model, parked all the way in the back of the lot. Engine off. No lights. But a man sat inside. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting, watching. "Hey," I said quietly to Natalie. "That guy's been sitting there since we pulled in." She glanced in the mirror. "Probably waiting for someone. Don't start your screenplay early, Jazz." But I didn't like the way he stared. Like he wasn't looking at us, but at the building itself, waiting for something to happen. Check-in was quick. The lobby smelled like toner and stale coffee. The guy at the front desk barely made eye contact and handed us the key like he was late for a smoke break. Room 108, ground floor, end of the hallway. Our room was fine, clean, technically. Beige wallpaper, a bathroom fan that sounded like a jet engine, 2 queen beds, and a dresser with a cracked mirror. There was mildew creeping up in the shower tiles and an old vending machine near the stairs that hummed like it was straining to stay alive. We unpacked. Natalie made jokes about the sheets. I tried to shake off the feeling that had followed me in from the parking lot. At around 9:30, we went out for snacks. As we came back from the machine, I saw him again, the man from the truck. Only now he was standing in the lot not far from our door. Coat too big, hands in pockets, just watching us. "You girls visiting?" he called out. His voice was calm, too calm. Natalie didn't stop. "Just passing through," she said, pulling me along. He smiled. "Lot of weirdos out here after dark. Be careful." My hands were shaking when we got back inside. I locked the door. Deadbolt. Chain. I didn't sleep for hours. The night crept by. I tried to watch TV, but nothing held my attention. Natalie had passed out with one sock half off and a half-eaten bag of chips on the nightstand. I stayed up, scrolling through my phone, checking the time every few minutes. At 11:15, I noticed the curtain wasn't closed all the way, just a sliver, a narrow strip of night visible near the edge. I stood up to fix it. That's when I saw him. The man. Standing outside our door. Not close enough to touch it, just outside the ring of orange light from the parking lot lamp. Not moving, not pacing, just there. My stomach dropped. I backed away. "Natalie," I whispered. "Get up. He's back. He's outside." She blinked awake, took one look at me, and sat up. "Where?" I pointed to the curtain. We peeked together, still standing, still staring. Natalie grabbed the room phone. No dial tone. "Try your cell," she said. I grabbed mine. 1 bar. I dialed 911. Nothing. Then, a knock. Not loud, not frantic. 3 steady knocks. We froze. Natalie reached into her bag and pulled out a heavy flashlight. "Let him try it," she whispered. I moved toward the peephole, looked out. Nothing. I leaned closer. The doorknob twitched. "He's still there," I whispered. "He's crouched below the peephole." We didn't speak, didn't move, just waited. Then we heard a voice, right near the floor. "I think you girls dropped something earlier." A light scraping sound followed, like paper being dragged. We didn't answer. Natalie held the flashlight like a weapon. Minutes passed. I crept forward, barely breathing. Opened the door 1 inch with the chain still latched. No one. But there on the ground was a receipt. My vending machine receipt. I hadn't dropped it, I was sure. We were out of that room in 5 minutes, threw our stuff into bags. Natalie kept her flashlight in hand the whole time. As we pulled the door shut, the pickup truck headlights lit up behind us. The engine turned over. We didn't look, just climbed into the car and drove. At a gas station 10 miles away, we finally exhaled. Natalie called the police from her phone, filed a report, described the man, the motel. When we returned the next morning with a local officer, the front desk guy acted clueless. "No guests matching that description," he said. "Cameras have been out since last week's storm." We left angry, frustrated and still shaken. 2 weeks later, I got the email. No subject, no sender, just a still image. It was a security cam frame. Time-stamped 11:41 p.m. Outside our door, the man, crouched, smiling at the peephole. I never figured out how they got my email, or if the motel staff was involved. Something about seeing that picture snapped a wire in me. I moved apartments, changed my number, started using a VPN for my email. I filed a follow-up report with the Eugene PD. Nothing ever came of it. No updates, no arrests. But something shifted in how I traveled after that. Now I ask for upper floor rooms. I double-check every lock. I carry pepper spray. I don't open doors even for staff without checking under the peephole first. I also don't write in the same way. The stories I used to build from my imagination now feel thin compared to what's real, compared to what waited outside our door that night. People say nothing happened, that technically we weren't harmed, but trauma doesn't always leave bruises. It leaves you checking shadows, locking things twice, wondering why your brain still replays a man's whisper at 11:40 p.m. That fall, I finished the screenplay I started before the trip. It was good. Got optioned by a small production company in LA. I should have been excited, but every time someone praises it for being real or tense, I think about Willow Creek Inn, about the man who watched, waited, slid a receipt under our door like a calling card. We never went back. We don't talk about it often. Natalie says we dodged something worse. I believe her. We weren't paranoid. We were lucky. And sometimes, lucky is enough. When your instincts whisper, listen. Fear doesn't always lie. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and someone who never blinks. I wasn't always the cautious type. I used to live out of my car, shoot back roads and abandoned train yards, drink gas station coffee and fall asleep under streetlights. My work as a photographer had taken me through some of the roughest parts of the Southwest, and I figured I'd seen it all. But there's something about being tired, like soul-deep exhausted, that makes you let your guard down. That's how I ended up at the Sierra Palms Budget Inn in Barstow, California, June 10th, 2021. I'd been on the road for 9 hours straight, trying to make it from Phoenix to San Francisco for a gig shooting a tech startup's product launch. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. I told myself I'd push through to Bakersfield at least, but when the dashboard clock hit 10:13 p.m. and I saw a faded highway sign blinking, food plus lodging, exit 176, I gave in. My head was foggy, my legs stiff, and I wasn't about to white-knuckle it another 2 hours. The Sierra Palms looked like a place that had given up on trying. A low L-shaped building squatted behind a broken chain-link fence, its flickering neon sign spelling out something close to vacancy. A vending machine leaned sideways near a cracked concrete bench. The place felt like heat and history and bad decisions. The guy behind the desk didn't even look up when I walked in. Ceiling fan buzzed above us, stirring cigarette smoke that hadn't been fresh in years. He wore a gray hoodie with the drawstrings pulled tight around his face, thumbs tapping endlessly at a phone with a spiderweb of cracks across the screen. "Cash is easier," he mumbled. "Card works if the signal's up. No refunds if you see a roach." I tried to laugh, but his eyes stayed flat. I handed over my card, and he slid me the key to room 117 without a word. The keychain was cracked plastic, the kind that used to say something cheerful in the 80s but was now rubbed blank. The room was what you'd expect. A sickly sweet cleaner smell couldn't hide the mildew or the something rotting undertone. The AC made a wheezing sound every few seconds. Carpet was crunchy near the corners, but the lock turned and the bed didn't look like it had blood on it, and I was too tired to care. I tossed my duffel on the armchair and laid down fully clothed. I don't know how long I was out before I noticed the sound of an engine. Soft, low, idling just outside. Then it revved and stopped, started again. I peeled back the curtain and saw a black sedan. Headlights off, no movement. At first I told myself it was nothing, just another traveler pulling in late, maybe a delivery guy. But as the minutes ticked by and the engine kept cycling off and on without the driver ever stepping out, that exhaustion began to morph into something else, unease. I turned off the TV, sat in the dark, and just listened. That car stayed there longer than it should have. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't just a bad motel. Something was wrong. It was around 12:08 when I heard footsteps outside my room. Slow, measured, just beyond the thin motel door. Then came the tapping. Not a knock, just a soft, deliberate testing of the knob. I froze. The tapping stopped. I crept to the peephole. No one there. I waited, held my breath so long I felt dizzy. And then, behind me, through the wall near the bed, I heard a whisper. "You in there?" I backed away like it was fire, flicked off the lights. It took me a second to remember the window. Cheap aluminum, no real lock, just one of those plastic latches that gave you a false sense of security. I scrambled over, flipped the latch, and shoved a rubber wedge into the track. That's when I heard it again. "Hey, you awake?" This time from outside the window. My chest felt like it would split. I dropped to the floor, crawled across the room to grab my flashlight from my bag. My phone was charging on the desk, signal dead. No landline, of course. The dresser was light enough to drag, so I pushed it across the tile and wedged it in front of the door. I lay on the floor for what felt like hours, staring up at the popcorn ceiling, flashlight off. My heart didn't slow down. It was like something primal had taken hold of me, some instinct that knew this wasn't normal, that I wasn't just being paranoid, that something out there was playing with me. Then, around 12:47, I heard it shift. The knocking wasn't on my door anymore. It was coming from next door. Room 116, 3 knocks, then again, then silence, then a voice. A woman. Soft, but wrong. Her tone was too steady, too flat. "Let me in, let me in, let me in." She repeated it, same rhythm, like a kid reciting lines for a play. Then she just stopped, like a switch flipped, no fade out, just nothing. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I stayed frozen behind the dresser, ears straining for anything. I didn't even realize my fingers were clenched so tight around the flashlight that my knuckles had gone white. That night wasn't done with me. At some point, the car started again. I checked the clock, 2:11 a.m. I crawled to the window, slowly peeled the curtain back just enough to see. The sedan was rolling again, inching toward the far edge of the lot. Its taillights lit up a figure in front of room 116. Something was moving, not walking, sliding. It looked like a person hunched low to the ground. The shape of them was wrong, like they were folding in half and dragging their legs. The way you see someone move when they've been crawling too long. I felt my whole body go cold. I couldn't see a face. Couldn't tell if it was the woman or the driver or someone else. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. I backed away, flashlight still in hand, and didn't sleep a minute. I sat in the corner until the sky began to gray, and the light finally crept through the curtain like some kind of mercy. When I opened the door that morning, I did it slow. The air was still. The heat hadn't risen yet. But something about the morning light made everything look worse, like it had been staged in a panic the night before. Room 116's door was open, just hanging there. I walked past it, couldn't help myself. No luggage, no clothes, no sheets on the bed. Just bare foam and a faint dark mark on the tile. Not blood, maybe coffee. I didn't check. At the office, I told the manager something had happened last night. He didn't look surprised. "No cameras out back," he said. "I'd stay gone if I were you. You staying another night?" "No," I muttered, taking my keys. "Probably for the best." I drove out fast, didn't even stop for gas. Later that day, I did a search. Sierra Palms Budget Inn had been shut down 3 times in 5 years. Health code violations, arrests, even a missing persons report from 2 years earlier. A man checked into room 116, never checked out, left everything behind. I don't know who was in that room next to me, or what, but I know I'll never stay in a 1-story motel again. Never take a room without checking the windows. Never fall asleep without a bolt or bar to keep me grounded. The road teaches you lessons in strange ways. Some are simple. Trust your gut. Don't ignore red flags. Others are harder, like how sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters. They're people, or what's left of them after places like that get a hold of them. I had been driving for hours, through empty stretches of road and gas stations that looked like they hadn't seen a customer in days. My GPS had lost signal an hour ago, and I was running on fumes, both in my tank and in my mind. The sign for Harbor Inn Motel glowed faintly in the distance, its letters flickering like they were debating whether to give up or stay on. It wasn't my first choice, not even my 10th, but at this point, I needed a place to crash. I pulled in. There was no front desk lobby, just a cracked window and a speaker grill. An older man appeared behind it. He didn't say hello, just stared, like he already knew who I was. "Just one night," I said. He slid a key toward the opening and pointed to room 12. "No smoking, no guests." I nodded and took the key. The air smelled like mildew and mothballs. My boots crunched against gravel as I made my way down the uneven path. Room 12 was in the far corner, partially hidden behind an overgrown bush. The room looked exactly like you'd expect. A faded red bedspread, water stains on the ceiling, a tube TV that probably hadn't worked since the 90s. But it was quiet, and for a moment I let my shoulders relax. I threw my bag down, locked the door behind me, and turned the deadbolt. The heater rattled to life with a low hum, and I flicked off the overhead light. My phone still had no service, no Wi-Fi either. But I was too tired to care. Somewhere near midnight, I thought I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, gravel shifting under pressure. I held my breath and sat up. Nothing. I told myself it was just the wind or another guest. I tried to sleep, but something kept tugging at my nerves. A subtle feeling, like being watched. I chalked it up to paranoia and exhaustion, but I pulled the covers higher and didn't fall asleep until well past 2 a.m. The knock was soft, but it jolted me awake. 3 slow raps. I stayed still, barely breathing. Then, another knock. I moved toward the window and peeled back the curtain, just an inch. The hallway was dim, lit only by a buzzing yellow bulb, but I saw the figure clearly. A man. He was standing perfectly still, facing my door like he'd been waiting for me to wake up. He didn't knock again. He just stood there. I stepped back. My heart hammered in my chest. Who the hell was this guy? I didn't know anyone out here. I hadn't even told anyone where I was. Another knock, louder this time. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. The man was still there, face hidden by a ball cap, hands hanging at his sides. No bag, no car keys, no luggage, just him. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I waited. Eventually he left. I watched him disappear into the shadows. But I didn't sleep again. I never went back to sleep. I kept the lights off and sat on the edge of the bed watching the window. The silence in the room was loud. The heater clicked and groaned occasionally, and every time I flinched. At 3:07 I heard footsteps again. Slow, uneven, like someone was dragging their feet. I crawled to the window and looked outside. He was back. Same man, same clothes. Still no movement from him. He just stood there facing my door, like he never left. I considered calling the front desk, but then remembered there wasn't one. Just that weird man behind the glass. I reached for my phone again. Still no service. I waited. This time he didn't knock. He just stayed. Minutes passed, maybe more. He finally walked away, but this time, instead of turning toward the parking lot, he turned toward the other rooms. My stomach dropped. There were only a few cars outside. Not all rooms were occupied. I wanted to leave. I thought about it. But walking out now meant exposing myself and walking past him if he returned. I stayed in the room, deadbolt secured, chair against the door. I sat in silence. Every creak in the walls, every shift of the wind outside, I noticed it. The hours crawled. I don't know when, but at some point I dozed off again. What woke me wasn't the heater or a knock. It was the unmistakable sound of a footstep. Inside the room. I froze. My eyes were open, but I didn't move. The room was dark, but I could sense someone else was there. The chair was still against the door, deadbolt locked. So how? Another creak. Closer. I sat up fast and reached for the lamp, but nothing. The bulb didn't turn on. I tried the overhead light. Dead. My breath quickened. I grabbed my phone and used its flashlight. The beam of light flicked around the room. No one. Empty. I got up, checked the bathroom. Nothing. Closet. Empty. I opened the door and scanned the hallway. No one was there. But something was off. I looked back at the chair I'd placed at the door. It was no longer flush against the doorknob. It had been slid slightly aside, just enough to open the door and close it again. I locked it again, jammed the chair back under the knob, harder this time. I didn't sleep anymore. I sat in the corner, flashlight in one hand, a tire iron from my trunk in the other, just waiting for morning. The sun came late, or maybe it just felt that way. When the first weak light of dawn cracked over the mountains, I grabbed my things and left. I didn't shower. I didn't brush my teeth. I just got the hell out. The man behind the glass window was still there. Same vacant stare. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. As I backed out of the lot, I looked once more in the rearview mirror. Room 12's curtain moved. Not like it was caught by wind, like someone was watching me leave. I drove. Didn't stop until I hit a major highway. Weeks passed before I could sleep without the lights on. Months before I could stay at a motel without checking every lock 3 times. I never figured out who that man was, or how he got inside. Maybe he never left. Maybe he lives there now, waiting. But I know this. Sometimes, cheap sleep costs more than you think. The desert does something strange to your mind when you've been driving too long. The silence, the vastness. It wears on your nerves in a quiet, creeping way. I'd been driving west for hours with nothing but dead radio stations and the sound of tires over sand-cracked asphalt. I was running on fumes. Emotionally, physically, all of it. 2 weeks at a hospice in rural Texas had drained everything out of me. It was my first assignment since Mom passed. I thought throwing myself into work would help, but instead I just felt hollow. I was halfway between nowhere and nowhere else when the road signs started to blur. My eyes were dry and my head was pounding. I told myself I could make it to Socorro before crashing for the night, but I started drifting lanes. That's when I saw the sign. The Red Pines Inn. Clean beds, quiet nights. Just 3 miles ahead. It didn't feel like a choice, more like something pulling me in. The inn looked like it hadn't seen a paintbrush in years. The sign buzzed and flickered weakly in the fading dusk. Dead pine needles carpeted the parking lot. No other cars. I figured maybe I was the only one desperate or dumb enough to stop. I walked into the lobby expecting a dingy welcome. Instead, it was just still. Not dead, not alive. Just still. The door creaked open and a tiny brass bell jingled above me. Inside, it smelled of old paper, mildew, and stale coffee. There was no one at the desk. I waited, tapped the counter, finally rang the bell. A minute later, an old man emerged from a back room. Long white beard, deep lines in his face. He looked at me for a long beat. Not annoyed, not unfriendly. Just like he was trying to remember something. Only room left is the corner one. Room 8, he said flatly. I nodded, too tired to ask questions. Don't use the back window, he added, eyes narrowing. Doesn't shut right. I paused. Okay. He slid a brass key across the counter. No paperwork, no ID, just silence. Room 8 was set apart from the other rooms, near the edge of the tree line. It looked like a converted storage shed. The door stuck a little when I pushed it open. Inside was a small bed, a ticking wall heater, yellowing wallpaper curling at the corners, and a crooked painting of a forest. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and let my head fall into my hands. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Grief had become background noise. I lay back, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling until the heater's steady clicks began to fade into something like peace. Until I heard something else. A knock, soft. Not at the door. At the back window. I lay frozen. The knock wasn't loud, just enough to be unmistakable. 3 gentle taps, like someone polite, someone waiting. I hadn't looked at the back window, didn't even think about it. The curtain was thick, mustard yellow, and hung awkwardly over the frame. I remembered the old man's warning. Don't use the back window. It had sounded like a maintenance note. Harmless. But now, I sat up slowly, ears straining. The room was still except for the old wall heater clicking as it cooled. I told myself it was the wind. Maybe a branch tapping against the pane. I stood, stepped lightly toward the curtain. Another knock. My heart jumped. This time, it wasn't so gentle. It was deliberate, like whoever, or whatever, was out there. Knew. I was inside. I grabbed the desk chair and slid it in front of the window. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't going to pull that curtain. Instead, I shoved the nightstand up against it too, forming a shaky barricade of fake wood and fear. I clicked on every light in the room. The shadows pulled back, but I still felt watched. Then the heater stopped ticking. Just silence and whispering. It started in the corner near the bathroom, faint, almost like someone breathing words without forming them. I spun, heart hammering. Nothing. I stepped toward the bathroom. The whispering moved, now near the bed, then behind me. It was like it had no source, just existing in the room itself. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course. I opened the door and bolted across the gravel to the lobby in my socks, my breath fogged in the cold. When I got there, the door was locked. I banged on the glass. Nothing. Through the window, I saw a dusty reception area. Same bell, same cluttered counter. But there was something behind it. A corkboard with old notes and a photograph. It was a group picture. 5 people smiling. One of them was the man who checked me in, but he looked younger, healthier. His beard was shorter, his face fuller. Beneath the photo in faded black marker were the words, "In memory of our founder, Alan Reeve, 1951-2002. I stumbled back. That man had spoken to me an hour ago, gave me a key, warned me about the window. Back in the room, I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair facing the window barricade, gripping my keys, waiting for dawn. But sometime after 4 a.m. I must have dozed off. When I opened my eyes, the curtain was pulled halfway open, from the inside. I left everything behind, bag, phone charger, even my wallet. I didn't care. The sun had just started breaking the sky when I got in my car and peeled out of the Red Pines Inn parking lot. I didn't stop driving until I saw the "Welcome to Arizona" sign. 2 hours later, I pulled into a gas station and asked the cashier if she'd ever heard of the Red Pines Inn. She looked confused. "Where'd you say it was?" she asked. "Off Highway 84, near the tree line. Kind of looked abandoned." She shook her head. "No such place out there, not anymore. There was a motel by that name, but burned down years ago. Think it was condemned. Some locals say it was never rebuilt." I left the station with a buzzing in my ears. I sat in the car for a long while, Googling every variation of Red Pines Inn I could think of. Nothing. No recent photos. No website. Just one newspaper clip from 2003 about a fire that killed 4. One of the victims was Alan Reeve. I knew I had to let it go. I had to move on. But I couldn't shake it. I couldn't explain the whispering or the man who gave me the key or the curtain being moved from inside. I tried to forget, tried to make it a story I didn't believe. But I couldn't sleep in motels anymore. I'd drive the extra hours to find something newer, something full of people. I stopped taking night shifts. And worst of all, the knocking didn't stop. Sometimes at home, alone in my apartment, I'll be lying on the couch or brushing my teeth and I'll hear it, soft, polite, always 3 taps. On windows I know are locked. On glass I haven't touched in hours. I told my therapist. She said it might be trauma, sleep hallucinations, residual stress from grief. Maybe. But there's something else. Something I never told anyone. A week after I left the Red Pines Inn, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a brass key with a faded tag. Room 8. I kept the key. I don't know why. I put it in a drawer I never opened, but I always knew it was there. Like it was waiting. Like it wanted me to remember. One night, months later, I woke up to a sound. Not knocking this time, but metal on metal. The key, rattling in the drawer. I got up, hands trembling, and opened it. Nothing was moving, but the key felt warm. I decided to drive back. I know how that sounds. Crazy. But I needed closure. I needed to see the Red Pines Inn burned to the ground. Gone. Erased. I had to know it wasn't still waiting for me. But when I returned to that stretch of Highway 84, it was gone. Not just the motel, the turnoff, the pine trees, the gravel lot. Everything. It was like it had never been there. I never went back again. But I think about it every time I pass a lonely road. Every time a motel sign flickers in the dusk. I never knew if what happened to me was grief, exhaustion, or something worse. Something that waits in places people forget. Something that doesn't want you to forget it. What I do know is this. Some places remember you, even when you try to forget them. Never ignore your instincts, especially when everything feels almost right, but not quite. Grief makes us vulnerable, and there are things in this world or between it that know how to knock at the exact right moment. I never meant to end up in Franklin, Kentucky that night. It's the kind of place you pass through with the windows rolled up and the music a little too loud to drown out whatever silence lives out in the dark fields. But that night, March 13th, 2024, I found myself pulling into the gravel lot of a rundown motel called Hollow Pine Inn with a half-dead phone, a headache behind my eyes, and no real plan of what tomorrow would look like. It started with dinner. Jenna and I hadn't been together for months, but we kept playing pretend, calling it closure when really it was just two lonely people orbiting what was left of something real. Dinner in Nashville was supposed to be a clean break, but one drink turned into two, laughter came too easy, and for a moment I believed maybe we were on the same page again. That fantasy lasted until a single text message, one she read over my shoulder, spiraled us back into old wounds. Words came sharp and fast. She accused, I deflected. Somewhere between the check and the parking lot, she said, "You're not the same anymore." That line stuck to me like tar. I didn't want to go home to Louisville. I didn't want to sleep in a bed that smelled like her shampoo. So I drove. North, then east, then nowhere. Gas station coffee kept me wired. By 11:30 p.m., the sky had opened up with a fine mist, and my contacts burned like hell. I saw a neon glow through the trees, Hollow Pine Inn, weekly rates available, and figured, screw it. One night, one sleep, then back to pretending I had it together. The place looked like it hadn't mattered to anyone in a decade. A single-story L-shaped building, brick faded into brownish rust, only 3 cars in the lot. Inside the front office, a balding man in his 50s leaned behind a desk that looked borrowed from a church basement. The name stitched onto his fleece just said Rick. "Need a room?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah, for one night. Only got 103 and 109 open tonight. 103 got heat." He raised a brow. "They all should." He handed me a key. Not a card, a real brass key with a worn leather tag. Room 103 was at the end, near the woods. The overhead light above the door flickered like it was trying to die. Inside smelled like bleach and old carpet. The wallpaper peeled in spots. The air had that heavy, stale stillness only cheap motels manage. But it was warm. The bed creaked when I sat on it, but I didn't care. I kicked off my shoes, turned on the TV. Static gave way to the Weather Channel, showing light rain in the region. I laid back, scrolling Instagram, ignoring Jenna's name lighting up my phone. I didn't want to fight again. Not tonight. I must have dozed off. When the first knock hit the wall, I thought I dreamt it. But at 12:09 a.m. it came again. 3 distinct knocks, sharp, deliberate. I sat up, heart skipping. The wall behind the bed separated me from room 104. "Probably just someone unpacking," I whispered, trying to calm my nerves. But 10 minutes later, the same 3 knocks came again. Bang, bang, bang. The rhythm was identical. I grabbed my shoes, opened the door, and stepped into the cold. My breath fogged instantly. Room 104's curtain was drawn, but a faint yellow light glowed behind it. I knocked once. Nothing. Again. Louder. Still silence. Just as I was about to leave, my eyes caught something behind the curtain. A bright yellow sticky note on the TV inside. From where I stood, I could just make out what it said. "Check under the bed." A chill crawled down my spine. I backed away slowly, heart racing. The hallway suddenly felt longer, the cold sharper. I turned and walked briskly back to 103, locking the door and jamming the desk chair under the knob. I stared at the wall, that shared wall, and tried to make sense of what I saw. Out of pure anxiety, I called Jenna. She answered, groggy. "Why are you calling me so late?" I think something weird is happening in the room next to mine." "Weird how?" "There were knocks on the wall, like loud. Then I went next door, no one answered. But there was a note in the window. It said, 'Check under the bed.'" There was a pause. "Are you watching TV right now?" I blinked. "Yeah. Weather Channel. Why?" "Because I can hear the knocking. Right now. Behind you." I turned slowly. Bang, bang, bang. 3 loud knocks again. This time harder than before. I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm leaving," I said. I didn't care how crazy it sounded. I bolted to the front office. Rick was still there, half dozing behind the counter. "Hey, man," I said, breathless. "Something's going on in room 104. I heard knocking. There's a note in the window." He frowned. 104's not booked. Hasn't been in over a week. "But there's a light on, and I saw a note. That room's motion sensor acts up sometimes. I'll check it with you." We walked down together. My hands were trembling. He unlocked the door. It creaked open. Dust. Cold air. Bed perfectly made. No footprints. No smell of anyone having been inside. He walked to the TV. No note. Blank screen. Then he crouched down, looked under the bed. "See? Nothing." I didn't even step inside, just nodded and backed away. "I'm checking out early. You okay to drive?" "I'll be fine, I just can't stay here." As I pulled out onto the road, I checked my rear view one last time. That's when I saw it. Room 104's curtain shifted. Not wind, not a draft, just the slow tug of fabric, like fingers dragging it aside to watch me leave. I never went back to Franklin, never told anyone outside Jenna. A month later, I asked her if she still had the call from that night. She didn't. Said her phone glitched and deleted it. She asked why I'd stopped at that motel in the first place. I didn't have an answer. But some nights, when it's real late and I can't sleep, I think about room 104 and how something inside that room never stopped knocking. That week after Franklin, my sleep was ruined. Every time I shut my eyes, I imagined a pale hand slipping from beneath a motel bed or that same note appearing in my apartment. "Check under the bed." I kept the blinds drawn, the TV on, and the hallway light glowing like a weak promise of safety. At work, I'd catch myself zoning out during meetings. My boss asked if I was drinking again. I wasn't, not since January. But fear has a way of making you look guilty, even when you're just exhausted. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe Rick was lying. Maybe someone was in 104. Someone hiding, squatting, trying to scare people off. But if that was true, why did Jenna hear the knocking through the phone? I didn't have answers. I only had questions. And most nights, I didn't have the courage to face them. Jenna texted a few times after that. At first, to check in. Then, more thoughtfully. We met once in late April, sat in her car, talked about what happened. She admitted something she hadn't told me that night. She'd recorded the call. Just for proof, she said. She always did that during arguments, but when she went to listen back the next morning, the file wouldn't open. Said it was corrupted. I didn't want to tell her, but I felt it too. That whatever happened in room 104 wasn't just physical. It left something behind in me. A fear that lingered, that watched, that knocked. She asked again if I remembered why I picked that place. I paused. I didn't. But somewhere deep down, I think I was pulled there. Not by fate or ghosts, but by something darker. Something curious. Something that wanted to be heard. In May, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no sender name. Just my name and the word Franklin scrawled on the envelope. Inside was a single yellow sticky note. Check under the bed. I moved apartments the next week. Since then, I've tried to rebuild some version of myself. I changed numbers, got a better job, started sleeping with the lights off again. But even now, a year later, I still avoid roadside motels. I still check behind curtains. And every now and then, when the silence is too deep, I swear I hear it. Bang, bang, bang. 3 knocks. Always 3. Here's what I learned. Some places are like traps. Not for your body, but for your attention, your curiosity, your past. Sometimes, they find the exact kind of broken person they're looking for, and wait. Patiently. The lesson? Trust your instincts. If a place feels wrong, it probably is. And if something knocks from the other side of a wall, don't knock back. Some answers are better left unknown.